What message do you think Israel is trying to send with these latest airstrikes?
Well, it's saying that I have power over most of the countries of the region, that I can extend that power not only into Lebanon, as we've seen since November, but also into Syria. And the message also says that I'm willing to deploy force and I'm willing to occupy. Effectively, that is a destabilizing factor, in particularly for Syria at this moment, when the country is trying to get back together, and in particularly in the Golan Heights and South Syria.
For Israel's part, it says it's doing this to protect the Druze minority. I want your take on that as well, and ultimately what the trajectory looks like here. What do these clashes tell us about the balance of power in Syria post-Assad?
Well, this idea that you're there to protect minorities is a non-starter. Syria is a state already, and Sharia is trying to bring all parties together, including all minorities. Now, having Israel come in as an external factor, saying that I want to protect minorities, disturbs the possibility that you could have internal harmony, which Sharia is really putting together. So not helpful at all. On the contrary, what needs to happen is that external powers, starting with the US, EU, and others, Turkey, the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia, others, UAE, really should reinforce Syria and Syria's unity and cohesion. We don't want external intervention by Israel.
What's also interesting for me is the fact that Trump has already shown a lukewarm embrace to Syria's new president. And of course, that has been followed up by the Gulf leaders as well, who are working out still whether or not they can trust al-Sharia. Israel appears to be taking a completely different approach here, again, really exacerbating what is a growing divide in the region between Israel's ambitions and the Gulf states. But from your perspective, Nasser, before we move on, what are the odds that this violence spills into Lebanon or the Golan? That would be the next flashpoint, perhaps the most concerning element of all of this as well. Your take?
Well, I think we need to backtrack a little bit. The US has removed Syria from sanctions. That's a very important step to help the Syrian economy and get back into the fold, into the international fold. They've now started using SWIFT again. So this will be very helpful for Syria. I think the efforts to stabilize will continue in the next few days, and I think I'm looking towards stabilization. I don't expect any spillover into Lebanon. I think everybody, all the actors are very much aware of the dangers of spillover, and I don't think anybody really wants that. Clearly, Israel is trying to play a more important role. Everybody else in the region, including Turkey and the Gulf countries, resist that, rightly so, I think. We want stability. We don't want any more war and violence. It's been very costly for us in terms of GDP, migration, displacement of population. Look at what's happened in Syria. World Bank estimates that GDP has declined by more than 55%, 60%. If you look at nighttime as a measure of GDP, it's more than 80%. The country has been devastated by 14 years of war and violence. We don't need more of that.
Nasser, let's pivot focus over to what's happening inside Lebanon today as well, something that you, of course, follow very, very closely. What we've seen in recent months is the Lebanese government making a more concerted effort now to delegitimize Hezbollah's parallel financial system. And I want your take on what has happened in the last 48 hours. Is this central bank circular a real shift in policy against Hezbollah? And explain to me exactly what's unfolding right now on the ground.
Well, the central bank has issued a circular 170 forbidding banking and financial institutions with dealing with Khard al-Hassan, which is a charity. Of course, they were never dealing with it anyway. It was outside the banking and financial system. But really, the greater context is that Lebanon was put on the Fatah gray list back in October 2024. And since then, the government and as well the new government and the central bank now have been trying to take the steps required to remove Lebanon from the gray list. This is important, and they've already passed a law in terms of banking secrecy and amending banking secrecy that the IMF had requested. So a number of steps are being taken to improve transparency, integrity, combat money laundering and terrorist financing as much as possible within the Lebanese economy. Remember, this is tough because we have a highly dollarized and a cash economy. So if you look at most consumption, it is in cash and in dollars. So the steps really are taken to want to restructure the banking and financial sector. That's the number one priority for the government as well as for the BDL. Now, these particular steps are really meant to help Lebanon have international confidence in its banking and financial system. Remember that remittances are about 6 or 7 billion per year. It represents more than maybe 35 to 40% of GDP, one of the highest in the world. And the remittances, of course, are critical for survival of many countries. We now have poverty, which we never had before. So people rely on the remittances. And the cost of remittances into Lebanon is tremendous. It's averaging around 11%. So what you need to do is to make sure that you remove from the gray list that lower transactions cost and really help the economy.
And Nasser, are you confident that enough work is being done to restore the credibility of Lebanon's financial system and rebuild the trust among international community participants and perhaps even foreign investors who would be looking at Lebanon's economy had the situation not improved sooner?
I think this government and the central bank are trying to take all the steps. There's been the beginning of judicial reform, a new team now at the central bank and the Banking Control Commission. So I think we're taking the right steps. At the same time, the security situation does not help. You've mentioned the south. We have continuing Israeli attacks in the south. That destabilizes the country. What we need is, of course, security and stability on all our borders. That will help restore confidence. But the restructuring of the banking sector will be critical. That will require a recapitalization of the banks, probably a bail-in by depositors, and a contribution by government. So all parties, bankers, depositors, and government will have to contribute to that resolution. And I think a bank restructuring act will be issued in the next few months. So I think the steps are being taken. It's not an easy policy environment. You've got a lot of structural adjustment that needs to take place. But I'm confident that the will is there.